Hi, my name is Emma Yoakum and this is Remade by Emma. Welcome to my channel where I knit, sew, and DIY, often using secondhand materials. Today I wanted to talk about how I salvage yarn from sweaters. This is a topic that comes up frequently in many of my videos, if not all of them so far, and I just wanted to walk you through my process of finding sweaters to unravel and then picking projects to use that salvaged yarn for. And you may be thinking, that sounds like a lot of work. For what reason? I could just buy yarn. You're right, you totally could. The reason I do this is because I feel like it saves me money. I get nicer materials a lot of the times for cheaper, but also I love sustainability. It is deeply rooted in my heart, and I do my best to reuse and recycle every day, and that translates to my hobbies as well. So it is a lot of extra work to unravel yarn from sweaters, but personally it gives me a lot of satisfaction, and it's a big reward for me to put that extra effort in to get materials that are sometimes nicer for way cheaper, but also just to reuse and recycle every day, even with my hobbies. If this is a process that interests you too and you just don't know where to get started, that's what this video is for. So we're just gonna jump into my process. So step number one is to obviously find some sort of sweater that you can unravel to use for a project. And I'm going to talk first about where I usually source these sweaters. My main source is the thrift store. I love going to the thrift store, along with knitting, sewing, and just DIYing in general. One of my top hobbies is thrifting. It's just so much fun to me. It feels like a treasure hunt. It's something that I've done ever since I was a kid with my family. We loved going to thrift stores, especially my mom. She's the one that instilled that love into all of us. So yeah, I mainly look at thrift stores. Sometimes thrift stores can be hit or miss when it comes to quality sweaters. So I also look on eBay because you can really narrow down your search if you're looking for a specific color, a specific type of material, a specific brand. It's really easy to find and narrow down on those things on eBay. So that's my second place. And then third is that you can raid your own closet, which I don't do very often, but I am getting into a little bit in a coming project. So now that you know where to look for these sweaters, let's talk about materials, because you don't want to just get any sweater. I'm not really the kind of knitter that uses acrylic or polyester materials. I feel like if I'm spending a lot of time to knit or make a project, I want it to be made out of materials that are high quality, so that it lasts a very long time. Also, with the sustainability mindset, it's important to me to pick materials that are natural and high quality. So, materials for sweaters that I look for are cotton, wool, cashmere, silk. I've never found a silk sweater to unravel, but you know, I always look. Okay, here I have some examples of some different sweater materials that I have thrifted. The one that I have found most common to thrift sweaters in is cotton. There's so many, and cotton is a really great material to work with, especially for summer knits, which I guess not everyone loves knitting in the summer, but I personally do. Cotton is just like a very nice, easy material to care for. So this is a great place to get started, but as you can see, 100% cotton. This is Tommy Hilfiger. It's a nice, just tan color, but I have gotten so many 100% cotton sweaters and unraveled them. I got a pink one, an orange one, a cream one, a kind of green one, and this one, and I imagine I will end up thrifting many more. They're just, oh, and a white one too, I forgot that. They're just, it's easy to find, very versatile. And you just know that 100% cotton is, you can trust it, you know? This is an example of a wool cardigan that I've thrifted. This is not 100% wool. It's 80% wool, 20% nylon, but most of it is wool. And now that I'm thinking about it, I did thrift this before I was kind of like on a all natural fibers kick. But that's still not like a bad mix to have. I wish I could say easy telltale signs of what materials are. Cotton is very structured. It's also smooth, but not necessarily soft. It's not itchy and it's not super soft, but it's smooth. So hopefully that makes sense, but it's more structured, a little heavier. Wool is one that I have a hard time finding because it very often resembles acrylic sometimes too, for me personally. Even with a lot of experience, I still have a hard time mistaking acrylic as wool, but it's not. Anyways, it's a little scratchier, it's a little lighter. I think that wool is sometimes kind of a little bit hairy looking too. So yeah, what I do is I just gravitate towards colors, and then I will just reach in and take a look at their tag. And sometimes it's nice materials and sometimes it's not. And as you look more and more, like at thrift stores, you will get better at figuring out what materials are. I would also say that wool and cotton are kind of matte. They're not as shiny, where acrylics kind of tend to be a little shiny. And then lastly, I have cashmere. Cashmere is hard to pick from the crowd of acrylic too, because acrylics can sometimes be really soft, and so is cashmere. It's very soft. 100% cashmere. So far in my time of thrifting sweaters, I have come across the most cotton, secondly the most wool, and third cashmere. But I have come across cashmere twice, and it's always a fun surprise. The next thing you want to do is, if you found a sweater that's a color you like, a material that you like, the next you want to do is see if it's going to be easy to unravel or if you'll be able to unravel it for yarn, because sometimes you can't. Inside the sweater, this is what this seam looks like. Basically, it's just like panels of knit fabric that have been stitched together, but you can tell that they are finished panels. They're not serged, or I guess you'd have to know what the edge of a serger looks like, but basically they're just a finished edge. Secondly, hopefully I can figure out a way to show you this. On that seam, there's a little stitch. It almost looks like a braid to me. So it's just like loops. Hopefully you can kind of see that little stitch. It should be in all of your sweaters to unravel. See that? And that is what you want to look for to know if you can unravel it. Because if it doesn't have that, it's not going to be easy to unravel. Or like if it's serged, like I said, where it's just knit fabric that's been cut, you'll take a piece of yarn and unravel it to one end, and then it'll pop off because it's been cut on both sides. And that's not really usable yarn, obviously, because it would be in many, many, many pieces. So yeah, you want to look for that braided stitch is what I call it. And that's kind of going to be your magic string, is what my mom would always call it, is you'll pull one end of it, a specific end, and it will unravel. And then you'll have your pieces of material. Last thing, when looking for a sweater to unravel, just be mindful that sweater yarns are usually much thinner yarns, usually like a lace weight yarn, lace weight to fingering, sometimes worsted and DK, but just be mindful that whatever yarn you pick is the yarn you're going to have to knit with at some point. And it's not impossible to knit with tiny yarns, but obviously those projects take a lot longer. Sometimes you have to hold the yarn together multiple times. Sometimes you just have to use tiny needles. Sometimes you can pair it with a different yarn, but just be mindful that whatever size that yarn is, you will have to find a way to use it, and that might be using really tiny needles. Personally, for me, that's okay. I enjoy making sweaters and projects that have small yarns. If you are someone who's used to using a chunky yarn, this is going to be a huge wake-up call for you. Now that you have your sweater, before getting started on unraveling it, you're gonna wanna clean it, especially if it's from the thrift store. Something you might want is a depiller. I'll have the one that I use linked. It's so easy, and it's the best way to preserve the yarns that make up these sweaters. It's a little gentler than something like a sweater shaver, which I have used before, and it works sometimes, especially on really old, very pilly sweaters, but it's better to use like a depiller. So I'll have the one linked if you're interested. And then you just want to wash it. With cotton sweaters, it's really easy. You just throw them in the wash, throw them in the dryer. Sometimes they shrink, so you want to be a little careful of that. Make sure it's a gentle dryer cycle. With wool and cashmere, you need to wash it very gently. Do it in your bathtub or your sink or something. Use a gentle wool wash and lay it out to dry. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is just separate your sweater into pieces, and you do this by finding that braided stitch and you start unraveling it. It's really difficult to explain, and sometimes I still get it wrong, but basically the braided loop has little shapes of yarn that are kind of like a little arrow with the pointed down. They're curved at the top and then they come down to a point. That's how the braided stitch looks. Do you see that? It's rounded at the top and goes to a point, and the stitches go into each other. So this is the way you want to have it. You want to have the rounded top at the top and the point at the bottom, and you're going to start by picking the braid apart at the top and finding the magic string and pulling it. So I'll try to capture a video of this to kind of show you what it looks like. It is difficult to explain though. Once you've done that, you're going to have pieces of your sweater. You'll have a front, a back, and 2 sleeves. Unless you've got a cardigan, then it would be 2 fronts, a back, and 2 sleeves. Now that you have it all separated into pieces, your next job is just to start unraveling it. Now there's lots of different ways that you can do this, and if you're an experienced knitter, you might have different tools that will assist you in doing this. First of all, you can literally just wind it into a ball with your hands, just like wind it up into a ball. Super easy, super simple. I unravel sweaters a lot to use the yarn. So I recently invested in a electric yarn ball winder. I say invested, but it really wasn't that expensive. The ball winder I had before was actually free because my little brother 3D printed it, and it worked pretty good. But because I unwind sweaters a lot for yarn, I feel like it would be helpful to have a automatic ball winder just to make things a little simpler for myself, so that my hands can be working on unwinding the sweater and it can just wind itself. I will have that one linked down below too. And then lastly, this is something I haven't attempted yet, but you could also wind your yarn onto a yarn swift first, and then you could actually re-wash it to straighten the yarn again, because when you unravel sweaters, the yarn, it's all crimped when you first unravel it, which is fine. I have knit plenty of sweaters with it that way, but it does make it a little more difficult to knit, and also it might change your gauge swatch and just like your gauge in general. I haven't ever done this yet, but someday I would like to rewash my yarn and just like turn it into a hank basically, and then rewind it later. I haven't done this because I feel like it would be easiest to do on like a larger yarn, which is not what I commonly find at the thrift store and stuff like that. So I will someday, but I haven't yet. And now that your yarn is all wound up and ready to use, it's time to pick a project. Before you can really know what kind of project you can make with your yarn, you have to first figure out how much yarn you have. First, you have to figure out the weight of it, and usually it's just kind of an estimation. Most of the time the yarns I find are like a lace weight, but I have found like a light DK weight before, and you can also like hold multiple strands together and that will make it a heavier weight yarn. I just saw this little tool that kind of helps you figure that out. I'll have it linked too in case you're interested. I think I may need to get something like this because it looks like pretty helpful. Next, you need to figure out how much yardage you have, and I just got a tool that helps significantly with this. Truthfully, you need 2 tools to properly be able to estimate it, but I recently got this tool off of Amazon. It was $10. This is called a Nitty Knotty. Basically, you can create little hanks with this tool. It specifically helps you measure the yardage. So this is a 1 yard measurement. I'll show you how to wind it onto it, but you can also make a 1.5 yard measurement and also a 2 yard measurement. So we'll just do the yard. So basically you just take whatever yarn you're trying to figure out the length of, you just like start winding it onto it. It's pretty like self-explanatory. You just want to make sure you're not pulling too tight because it will make your measurement incorrect. You don't want the yarn to be stretched. Anyway, so basically you just wind it around there like that, and then once you've like wound it as many times as you want, you count how many strands you have and then multiply that by however long your thing is. So it's in a yard one, so I've just got 2 yards, but you can put lots and lots of yards on it. I used it earlier this week to estimate how much of this blue yarn that I have. I wrapped it around, counted 50 strands, multiplied it by 1 because it was the 1 yard measurement. So that means this is 50 yards. Then I put this on my kitchen scale to see how many grams it weighs. We'll just say it weighs like 25 grams, even though it probably doesn't. Then I weighed all of my yarn, and we'll say all of my yarn was 100 grams, including this. So that means 100 grams divided by 25, that's 4, times 50 yards, because this was 50 yards, 25 grams. So 4 times 50, that's 200 yards. Hopefully that math kind of makes sense, but that's how I figure out how much yardage I have of a particular yarn. And this method is super helpful for reclaimed yarns because obviously when you buy new yarns, it says on the label how much yardage it has. It's just a really great way of estimating how much yarn you have. You have to be careful not to stretch the yarn. Really helpful. So then once you know the thickness of your yarn and how much yardage you have, you can then pick a project. And for me, I personally have like a huge just stash of dream projects on Pinterest. I have a board on Pinterest dedicated to knitting, and I have so many different categories like fall and winter sweaters, spring and summer knits, accessories, projects for other people, just so many different things. Keep in mind when picking a project that you do not have to use just the reclaimed yarn. You can pair it with something else, either a different reclaimed yarn, a new reclaimed yarn. Also, when picking a project, you want to also knit a gauge swatch, just to make sure that you're hitting gauge. But let me show you an example of some projects where I'm holding other yarns with my reclaimed yarn. Okay, so this is a project that I recently cast on. It's going to be a little cardigan for my daughter. But for this project, I'm actually holding kind of an odd combination of yarns. At least I never really thought to do this combination of yarns until recently. This is my reclaimed yarn. This is just a cotton sweater that I unraveled, and you can see it's a very thin yarn. I'm pairing it with another thrifted yarn. This is not from a reclaimed sweater. It's just like a wool yarn that I thrifted, kind of a mystery wool yarn. But I'm pairing them together, and so they're creating kind of a thicker yarn, not incredibly thick still, but thicker. And I'm knitting just a cute little cardigan for my daughter, and it's got like this pretty little marling. It's also like, this wool is kind of not like itchy, it's maybe slightly scratchy, so I wanted to soften it up a little, which is why I paired the cotton with it. So it's a lot softer, but it's still got the warm factor with the wool. It's going to be a nice little cardigan for her. So that's one example. Another example, this is just a gauge swatch that I've been working on for a couple of videos if you've been following me. But this is another example of pairing reclaimed yarns with non-reclaimed yarns. This one actually has 3 lace weight yarns in it. It has 1 reclaimed cashmere yarn, 1 reclaimed wool yarn, and a new mohair. That's just an example of, you don't have to just use the reclaimed yarn, although you could, and I have done that before. And then after you have picked a project, gauge swatch, and you make gauge, and you have the right amount of yardage and everything, you just start knitting just like normal, just like a normal project. Let me show you an example of something I knit with reclaimed yarn that turned out so good. This is my Dagmar jacket by Petite Knit, and I knit this with a reclaimed yarn. It was a 100% wool sweater that I got at the thrift store. Just this like pretty gray tweed yarn. So gorgeous. This is when I was kind of newer at knitting and also like unraveling sweaters to use the yarn for new sweaters. So I did not have the tools or the knowledge to estimate how much yardage I had. So I actually ran out of yardage. You can probably tell, but the sleeve is a slightly different color than the body. So the body is 100% the reclaimed yarn, and the sleeve is like half the reclaimed yarn, half of a new old yarn, like a yarn that I purchased secondhand on eBay. Take that as your warning that you do need to kind of estimate how much yarn you have, especially if you want to make a big project like a sweater. If you're taking a sweater and making something smaller like a beanie, you probably don't have to do that. But if you're taking a sweater, making another sweater, you probably do want to do that. I took a white cotton sweater, unraveled it, and made a white cotton t-shirt. but I held the yarn double, and I was able to successfully make a cotton t-shirt, but it was kind of cropped and I would have preferred it to be a little longer. So like that's the thing where like you really gotta estimate how much yardage you have if you want to be able to successfully knit projects. But I highly recommend going to the thrift store and seeking out high quality sweaters that you can unravel and use the yarn for. Personally, it gives me a lot of satisfaction. It adds to the project for me. I have a deep love of DIY and I love just being there for every single part of the project. So for me to take an old sweater, unravel it, and use the yarn for a new sweater, I have a love for that. It's part of the process and it gives me so much satisfaction, and so I highly recommend it. I've given you the tools to get started and I hope that you do, and let me know if you've done this before or if you have any additional tips for me. I would love to hear it. Also, if you have any questions for things that maybe I didn't mention, please let me know down below in the comments. If you made it this far, please subscribe to my channel and like my video. I talk a lot about knits and sewing and DIY. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.